This episode is brought to you by BigMooseCoffeeCompany.co.
Pals, hello there. Greetings and welcome to another episode of Everything Endurance. It is, as always, an absolute delight to have you with us again today on this lovely, sunny but wintry Friday the 27th of November. We have plenty of things to talk to you about today. Let's see, what shall we do for starters? It's the 27th of November, which means if you are listening to this episode around the time when it comes out, and good for you, you should be downloading these episodes when they come out, right? This is high quality material. If you are one of those people that is there for us as soon as these episodes are ready to download, then you have until the 3rd of December to get your entry in the ballot for the Forangers Ultra. Yeah. It's that close. 3rd of December, we're going to close the ballot for the Forangers Ultra. It's sold out in its first 2 years, and despite everything that's going on in the world, we're still getting a hell of a lot of ballot entries in. We've allowed a little bit more time for people to get those entries in this year, but not much more. 3rd of December you've got until, so go on, pause this. Whatever you're doing, go and Google Forangers Ultra and get your entry in now. You are running out of chances fast. What's been going on in the world at the moment? Well, let's see. We're not going to mention the pandemic. I mean, why would we? We all know what we're living through. Not when there's really exciting stuff going on like Kilian Jornet going for the Yanis Kouros 24-hour record. That's happening literally now as I speak. Into this fluffy little microphone you can see in front of me. We are something like 5 hours into his attempt. He's going out there. Kilian Jornet, say whatever you like about him. I mean, he is an inhumanely good runner out in the mountains. His lung capacity must be like 4 people strapped together. It's absolutely ridiculous what we've seen that man do in the past. Now, 24 hours on a track. Totally different kettle of fish. I'm really interested to see how this is going to pan out, and I can only imagine you guys are as well. I wonder how much Yanis Kouros is actually sweating at home right now, waiting to see if Kilian can knock off 304 kilometers or more. But that is a 24-hour running record of 303-ish kilometers that has stood since 1997. That Kilian Jornet is going for. I mean, if Kilian does manage to pull it off, I obviously will get in touch with his people and see if I can get him on the podcast, but I'm not sure I 100% rate my chances. But, why don't you guys ping a message to him on my behalf? Everything Endurance would love to talk to you. You should appear on the show. It's fantastic. Maybe you can get a little credit in my direction. But, yeah. I think that's going to be really, really interesting. It's going to be worth me getting up at stupid o'clock tomorrow morning to see how that's panned out. After that, I have a little bit of disappointing news, I'm afraid. I know. Brace yourselves for this. It's going to be a little bit difficult to hear, but I'm going to stop talking in a minute or two, and Chris is going to start. It's true. I have allowed Chris back into the podcasting studio. Well, actually, I mailed him a microphone, and he stuck it in the top of a roll of kitchen towel to stop it falling over and recorded it of his own accord. But I allowed him to hold on to the microphone again and to record another interview for us. Begrudgingly, I would have to admit that the interview is actually interesting and quite funny. And as much as it pains me to say that, it is true. So I do think once I've finished talking here, you guys are just going to have to hang on in there and listen to him. If you are watching it back on YouTube, that does mean his outrageously big floppy hair is going to be on the screen in front of you in a moment. I can only apologise for that. Also, the bags under his eyes, you'll have to forgive him for at the moment. He is looking about the most haggard I've ever seen him, but he is only about 2 weeks into fatherhood. So I don't think he's had more than about an hour and a half's consecutive sleep in the last fortnight. So, I'm going to have to take my hat off to him here, my metaphorical hat. He has at least managed to string together an hour-long interview without falling asleep, which is amazing under the circumstances. The interview in question. This is good, this. Over the course of the whole time that we've been doing this podcast, which is like 50-odd episodes now, we've seen people who've joined Beyond the Ultimate out there on the trail, on our races, whether it's out there in the jungle or out there in the desert or the ice or wherever it is they've joined us, that have then become part of the fold, that have ended up appearing on the podcast and carving their own way in the world as professional ultra runners and coaches and stuff like that. Today we're going to be talking to another person who we met during one of our adventures. And isn't that the best way? This is an ultra runner who came out with us to Kenya. I think it was 2018. A very, very good ultra runner, a genuinely jolly good bloke who's fantastic to be around, who came to us with some ideas about races that he wanted to set up himself. And we got talking, and we kept talking, and pints were had, and all of a sudden plans were dreamt up. And now, before you know it, April next year, we are going to be on the Knoydart Peninsula in Scotland, in the on the west of Scotland, on that beautifully rugged area of coastline that we've told you about already a couple of times. And we are in the middle at the moment of developing that race from scratch. So this seemed like an opportunity for us to do something that we've never done before, which is to talk to the team behind one of our races while they're in the planning stage of it. So we're going to talk to Nick today about why he wanted to do this race out there in the first place, why he's so excited about it, and what goes into planning an event like this in the background. I think there's some really interesting stuff in here. And again, begrudgingly, I would have to admit to Chris here, if you are listening back, I did actually listen to the interview and it's pretty good. I might let you on the show again. Look, without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you someone you already know, which is Chris King. And Chris King is then going to introduce you to Nick Watson.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 55 of the Everything Endurance podcast. And all we have to ask ourselves is, how did we end up here? 55 episodes in, that's near enough 55 hours of useless tripe that has been broadcast to you, and you're still here. Well done. Well done. Now, I imagine that by this point, Will has done a lovely intro to the episode. I've pre-recorded this, so he's got a great opportunity to slander me in some way. He has probably mentioned my floppy long hair and called me something like a floppy knobhead. He's probably had a go at me for, not sleeping in a couple of weeks or something like that. It'll be something. All I'll say is, at some point in the future, Will, I will do an intro. Just be wise with your words. Just be wise. Now, on today's episode, we've got a cool guest because he initially was a runner with us. So was a runner even before my time at Beyond the Ultimate, and did the Ice Ultra back in before my time, so it doesn't even count. And then we met properly for the first time when he took on the Foranges Ultra back in 2018, it will be. And then since then we kept in touch, and because of the job I have, I end up getting contacted quite a few times actually. In the year, talking about, it'd be a really cool place to do a race here. I get contacted by a lot of tour companies that are like, hey, come and put a race on in our area. But after a quick catch up and a beer with this guy, we had a little chat. We was looking at doing a race domestically, and lo and behold, we're now in this position where we're designing this amazing race together. If you're listening to this, chances are you may have seen us launch the Highland Ultra in Knoydart. You may be listening to this as a runner that's already signed up. So amazingly, we've had 100 people join us already. So we've got 50 remaining places left. And it is shaping up to be an awesome adventure. We are, at the time of recording this, we have just recorded after the announcements from Matt Hancock for the tiered zones. But we still remain quietly hopeful that with all of the things that are going on now and the positive news of the vaccine, this could be a realistic shot of us having a really cool adventure in April together, where COVID has really had a kick in by that point, and we just even the thought of having an adventure with a big group of people and being relatively relaxed is great. So fingers crossed for that. But we are going to talk today with the brainchild of the event, and that is the incredible Nick Watson. Welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Now, we obviously have had a few beers together, Nick.
We have.
Our first proper beer that we had together was in Kenya, at the finish line there. And I think you found that event quite cool, right?
yeah, to the point that you have me on film saying that this is the coolest days of my life, and I include the birth of my children. So I've now said that very publicly. That's it. You've not got that to hold over me anymore. So that's it done. It was. I mean, that was some event. It really was a pretty special time of my life for sure.
Well, the thing now that you've come public with it is I can no longer blackmail you with it. So we kind of got rid of my, my secret weapon. Yeah. So we met there, and it was our first event, and I think it was quite interesting, really, because you had a taste of Beyond the Ultimate back in its very early days when it was just started up, and then you got a taste of it a good few years later. So that would have been a 3.5, 4 year gap between your first and second event with us, and it kind of give you a taste really of how different we are as a company in that time, right? So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not. It was a great company back then, but there's a real evolution that's happened, and it's now very very special, very capable company, and putting on incredible events for sure.
And I think that's what led us to this point, is because obviously we have it quite a lot of the times. Our runners get quite passionate about our races and series and stuff, and we create a cool little tribe. And then realistically, the only way that we would have unlocked this area to be able to, adventure in was the fact that you really understood our values, and they happen to align with this area that is really highly protected in many ways. When we you told me about the place and we booked a time to go, I think we were both worried, wasn't we? Like, we could go up and do a recce, but being able to have a commercial event in this area, I think about 15 or 16 other companies had tried and not really got in, and all of a sudden we find ourselves on the shores of Inverary, ready to have a meeting with these guys. And I think we both looked at each other like, all right, well, worth a shot. Exactly.
Well, it's as much about wanting to partner with people, and an area like this is so special. It's so unusual and unique that if you don't have support of everybody in the region, you can still do something, but it's just not going to work as well. And so we were very, very conscious that right from the start we had to, as you say, align the event, align our values with their own, or with everybody in the area's values, and make sure that what we did helped, but also we had the support of everybody in the region. So yeah, it was certainly a process. It was a long one, but and I had a good insight from some acquaintances of mine who are in the conservation industry and know the area well, and they were able to help and steer. So yeah, it put us in a good spot. But as you say, the values of Beyond the Ultimate exactly align with the values of an area like this, and so a great opportunity to create something.
Yeah, and I think that's what, it definitely helped that we have experience, like all of our races are pretty much in UNESCO heritage sites. So, you don't get to operate in areas like that for a long period of time. You won't even be invited back the next year if you make a mistake. So I think that was a really good way to step in. However, it also meant that we had this kind of, a prerequisite to the area. We wanted it to basically represent and fit in with the rest of our series. So there's a limited amount of places you can go there. And even when you look domestically, it becomes a tiny, tiny pocket of places that you could potentially put a race on where you think, we're going to work with the area. We've got conservation-led mission there. We're going to leave no mark, all of our kind of policies there. And Knoydart's one of those places really that, if you're a bit of an adventurer, a bit of a climber, or an outdoorsy Scot, of Knoydart. Of that. To the main demographic of people, it hasn't got the, I don't know, maybe the PR of the Isle of Skye, or even Iran. That has become quite a place to visit, or the Hebrides, or most people have heard of that. But when you mention Knoydart to a lot of people, it automatically raises an eyebrow of where. And I think one of the great things about this place, it does have that air of mystery about it. It does have that air of, and I guarantee out of the 100 people that are on our race so far, I imagine a good 90% of them, or even 80% of them, were Googling what this place is, and the other 20% were like, oh my God, I know Knoydart, I want to go there, you know. So I think it's been a real interesting journey to this point. But I think the most exciting thing for me is how excited you are about the area, you know, and I think it's probably worth telling all the guys that listen to this, you know, a bit about the area in detail and just kind of give them the groundwork of why you thought that this area would be good.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, there's a very, very long way of answering this, or a slightly long way of answering. I'll go for the slightly long. I mean, basically, having done the race many, many years ago with you, and then obviously more recently the Four Rangers, I've been thinking for years how, you know, what a great playground Scotland is for an event like this, whether it be a multi-day, whether it be a single stage, and there are a number of them about up here. But I agree with your comment that to align with what you do so closely, to make it so stand out, the list becomes quite short of places that really work. And I mean, my background before I took on, you know, stage races or ultras organized is I just frankly, and you said it before yourself, I like putting on a backpack, maybe with a tent, maybe not, and just disappearing off for a day, 2, 3, 4 days, and just not really having a fixed agenda. So I've been doing that now for, you know, 25, 30 years in the hills. And through all that time, there's a number of places which have really stood out to me as being truly exceptional, truly world-class is the expression I keep using with you. And you're right, my enthusiasm for it is because it is such a world-class location. And Knoydart really stands, you know, at the top of that pile. And that's not me in any way saying there aren't other, you know, incredible places in Scotland. I mean, the place is full of them, but this one really just has that little extra. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's not widely known about outside, you know, certainly Scottish people know, or UK, a lot of UK people know, but it's not that widely known. And part of it is just simply the accessibility or lack thereof, inaccessibility. So as background to it, I mean, Knoydart you cannot get to by road. There is no road access to it. It is part of the mainland, but it feels like an island. The two routes in are a boat or across a very good but remote trail, which is at the end of an hour of single track road from one of the main highways. So it's a real journey to get there, and those people that do, everybody falls in love with it. There's nobody I've ever spoken to that's been to this part of the world and not come back and go, that is truly special. And I think part of it is it's one of the last places that you really do have to work to even get to, let alone then start enjoying. And again, that's not Cairngorm Plateau. Other parts of Scotland are inaccessible and very difficult, but there's infrastructure leading up to them. You can get relatively close. You've then got to work once you're there. But this one, you've got to work to even get into the area, and that just adds something to it. So, in terms of the history of it, it's got a very fascinating history, which I'm looking forward to sharing in a bit more detail with people when we get up there, and there'll be some. We'll talk about it later, I'm sure, but there'll be some speakers and things who'll be able to who can chat to the runners and give a bit more of the detailed history. But it's full of history that aligns with the rest of the Scottish Highlands, all the clearances, etc., etc. But the more recent times, the main part of the peninsula was bought by the Knoydart Foundation, which is a charity set up to own it, and it is run by the residents of the peninsula. So, and that's a pretty special thing in its own right, for them to have achieved. And their mission is really to create a sustainable environment out there, both in terms of wildlife, but also in terms of human existence, and create a way that the two can coexist effectively. And that, to me, is another really fascinating part of this. Is that's the great challenge that faces not just Scotland but a large part of the world. Is how to create that the sustainable environments. And I saw that very really clearly when I was in Kenya, in particular, of all the races I've done recently, how they've achieved that in the game reserves. Now they're closed off game reserves, but they're extremely interesting and exciting environments that do allow wildlife and humans to largely coexist. And so there were bells and chimes going off all the time through all these things I've done, going, this is the opportunity to do this. And that was really what I took to Knoydart when I started speaking to them, and I think they picked up immediately this shared value that Beyond the Ultimate has and that they have, and in terms of other wider history, I think it's in a great phase of evolution actually as a place, and it gets a good number of visitors every year, and that number grows. But not only has it got a fascinating history, but it's got a very fascinating future as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, right? So, in recent history, like you say, it's got a fascinating long-term history that we'll probably go into detail on event with the people that are with us. But in terms of the short-term history, you're not looking too far back where the place was populated, just to give people an idea of numbers, by a couple of hundred people, So it was a small community, locked in, away from the mainland, but on the mainland. And there was, you wouldn't call it a thriving community, but it was community nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
The people were getting on with their lives and coexisting with wildlife. And, it is a stunning area. So I imagine it was a pretty cool place to live. And then what's happened over the last couple of 100 years is people have moved out, people have moved over to the mainland, and it's become this place now where there's almost like, you've got the foundation's aims to repopulate to a degree and have sustainable housing back on there and to try and bring it back up to the numbers that it once was. You've got some people that are, they look at it as their little bit of heaven and kind of think that it should stay that way. But one of the things that was interesting to us was that they're not particularly interested in large amounts of tourism, and we love that. We love that because it's what a great way to host an event and also be sustainable in the fact that we're not coming with the attitude of we want to put 500 people here and increase your secondary spend and all this. It's actually, how can we come and bring 150 like-minded people that really want to protect the wilderness that you guys live in? How can we do that? How can we help? And I think that's where we've come from, and that's the starting point. So that's why we've built these really cool partnerships really early on. And I think the one that we've established, first off the block of, we've now got our own, we've already had our very own woodland in Scotland, but we've actually now brought it onto a race location, which is insane. It's a natural woodland en route of the race. So you'll run past this woodland. It is going to be looked after by the Woodland Trust there in Knoydart, and every runner that does our race is going to have trees planted. They can opt out of their t-shirts and they can plant a tree, and we would have our own little spot of land, our own little woodland, which has been created by our runners, and it will be kept in a sustainable way as well, which is great. And that's one of many of the partnerships that we've got in there. We're working on the rewilding projects and stuff now. But I think that's the key, isn't it? That if you're really passionate about adventure and looking at conserving the areas in which you want to roam, that's where this race is going to be. It's going to be perfect for you for that, because it's mission led. It has that purpose. So, and we talk about all that, but the one thing that we just can't ignore is it is bloody beautiful.
Oh, it's just,
it can also be horrible. We've got to be honest. Like, it's Scotland at the end of the day. Like, on the kit list I'm kind of drawing up now on I've got like these A3 bits of paper, and honestly, it's going to be like a Mary Poppins bag, and I'm trying to condense it down because I think the runners probably don't realize yet is that they could face snow and get sunburn on the same day. There could be sideways wind and rain, and there could be everything. There could be everything. So, but I said to you, I think on a couple of days in, I'm very fortunate that I get to travel around the world and go to some pretty cool places. And what happens with that is you get a kind of, I'm very appreciative of any kind of wild space and open space and nature, but you get almost like a blindness to some of it. Yeah. Like when you've spent some of the time, like hours and hours and hours in places that I've been fortunate enough to do, I kind of was trying to come with an open mind to this place of like, well, it may not be as good as this, that, and the other, but we've got to be open-minded. And even on the boat ride in, I can remember I shared a look at you with you, and I was like, oh mate, if this continues,
Yeah.
this continues. And I was actually annoyed at myself for not knowing about this place. Like, I was really annoyed. So I'm pretending to be this expedition leader. I don't even know of this place. It's right on my doorstep. And then, I was going through this journey on the boat, and I was really excited. I was like, oh my God, I've got this place to explore in. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like, this place has got the air of mystery. It's got the cool history to it.
Yeah.
But, on that boat ride in on a clear day, and especially on the way out, like we did, we were seeing, there was like dolphins and stuff popping around in the water. It was almost like a Norwegian fjord, wasn't it? As we kind of came in, there was a mist over the hills, and you just think, wow, if the runners get this weather, it is going to be incredible for them.
Yeah.
And then there is the actual opportunity that they might not be able to see a foot in front of them, but that is part of the adventure in Scotland as well, isn't it? That's the that's the thing.
100%. And I mean, and again, I've had this in my head. I've had this sort of area and this route and this race, event, whatever we want to call it, in my head for years. And when I was thinking, how do I make it a reality? And it really, straight away, once I'd finished the Rangers and we'd met and we'd spent some time together, I was like, it just couldn't be more aligned. But I knew I had exactly the same thoughts of going, am I overplaying how good this place is in my head because I love it so much? Am I just sort of biased because I've got so many great memories there? I'm taking this to a person who, every year is in the Amazon, every year is in Kenya, every year is in Namibia, every year is in Sweden. God, this is going to have to be something good. But the more I thought about it, the more I went, oh yeah, this place will stand up to any of that in its own way. I mean, it's different. It's and I think more than any other place that I, as I've already said earlier on, I love many parts of Scotland. I mean, there's some truly world-class scenery up here, and anybody who comes up here, actually, I would urge to go and explore other bits if they haven't spent much time up here, and I can obviously help with that. But I had complete confidence that what I was going to show you would surprise you at how special it was, because I knew that. So no, you're exactly right. It's got everything that you need for a spectacular location, plus that remoteness, and plus the fact that it's not just, you can't just drive up to it. You have to make the effort to get there. And I think, it's got everything. It's got the water approach. It's got some very dramatic mountains, and one of the reasons they're so dramatic is because they start from 0 feet and they end at Monroe height. You start at sea level, and
they're like kid-drawn mountains, aren't they? They're not like like in Ben Nevis, you see it kind of go off into the distance, don't you? So it kind of slowly go. These are like a kid would draw a mountain on a. They're like up. Down.
That's it, and there's several of them, and that's the biggest draw really for that area. Is people go across there and climb the Monroes that are on the area, and we didn't get up one when we were there because we had lots of things to do. But when you're up on the top of it, I can tell you, looking back onto the mainland, it is looking back over towards the mainland is very, very special as well. But even without that, the scenery that we saw. I'm sort of struggling. I'm trying to work out how best to say it, but it will surprise everybody if they haven't been there before. Yeah. I think it's the way to
I think if I was to use one word, it'd just be gnarly.
Yeah,
that'd be a way to describe it. So each day will be slightly different on the race. So like day one, there's a bit of runnable terrain. There's a lot of coastline, but then there's a lot of vert. There's quite a big hill mountain you've got to go over. There's a lot of terrain on that is boggy, but then there's like little waterfalls and streams, and you come down. So like the footage that you guys have seen already, if you've seen our trailers, are predominantly day one, either in reverse or whatever. That is day one, and it is completely different, really. And then you've got the isolated beach at Barrows-Dale, which is, that beach, that little locked-in beach, you've either got an hour drive down a single track and then a good 2-hour walk to get to, or you've got a boat ride and a good 2-hour walk to get to. So that beach is, no one's on that beach. It's untouched.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that I just loved about it, is the fact that it felt like you were miles away. Well, you are, but you feel like you're just in the middle of nowhere. And I think that kind of also is when we were coming to do all of the logistical stuff in the evening, you think, well, actually there's no road network, there's no phone signal, there's no phone signal at all, there's no opportunity to get internet and Wi-Fi. Yes, this is the same as all of our others, like this is we're going to have to literally pack up everything that we take, that same thing. And it is just like we would do abroad. We're going to have the same types of trackers because they're the only ones that are going to work there. Yeah. Regular tracking systems don't. And then you think, yes, this place is properly remote, and it plans to stay that way. Yeah. So I would say gnarly is the. I mean, Kimball will love the word, the way that I've used the word gnarly. If I throw the word rad in, he'll probably like that as well. But it's kind of, because I think we can't really share the kind of concept because we actually came to Noidart with a different idea. Yeah. We will still do that idea. But we came to Noidart with a different concept to a race. So it would have been a multi-day and it would have been an ultra, but it had a very different concept to it. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because we established quite quickly that we couldn't do that here. Well, with the remoteness, or it would have been extremely hard. But then the main thing was that the terrain is raceable, but not in the kind of concept that we wanted to do it. And it just, because of that, because you wouldn't want people tearing it down at absolute speeds down some of this place. And especially if we go in Munro hunting on day 3, it just becomes one of those things where that's how gnarly it is at times. Yeah. We have decided, the guys that put the race on in the jungle, that it couldn't be of this concept, so it has to be back into our 3-day multi-event. But the benefit of that is, I suppose, is that it becomes a taster of our other events. Now, if you're on this race and you are booked onto another one of ours, it's a perfect training race for any of our series. You'll have wet feet and loads of climbs like the jungle. You'll have loads of climbs like you will in Kenya. There may be some heat like you have in Kenya. Granted, not to the same.
Can I cut you there? You told me there were no hills in Kenya before we went. I'm still on that. You told me the whole thing was runnable and there were no hills. And
it's runnable. Just run up a hill. I didn't say it wasn't hilly. I said it was runnable. Yeah. You've got to be fit enough to run up those hills. That's the difference. So the terrain itself is incredible. But I've lost my train of thought now. You've thrown me.
Coming back to the original point, you're right. We went there with a different idea in our head.
Yeah.
And I think not only was it because it wasn't, it didn't suit it, but actually it was also, it didn't need it, if I can say that. And that's not I mean, exactly. The concept that you're working on is fabulous and it's going to be brilliant. But this is just an area to go, and for us, it's enjoy, and for the 150 people who come along, it's for them to enjoy doing what they love in an area that is truly spectacular and unusual. But that's all it needs. It's not one for, as you say, people. I mean, I hope some people will race it very hard, and you can, and because of the nature of it, you get plenty of time to enjoy where you are, and the distances involved are good. They're manageable, but they're tough. The climbs are tough, but they're manageable. So there's plenty of time to enjoy where you are, but also race. But it doesn't need anything beyond that. That's what it takes. And as you say, training for the others, having done some of the others, it is again, it is perfect.
Well, any multi-day, any fast packing adventure. Like if you like the idea of going out somewhere in the wilderness with a backpack, but you don't want to do it on your own for the first time, it'd be a great thing there. And like that was my train of thought that before, wasn't it? It was that it'd be good for the other events. Like what we also want to do is have like a festival feel at the beginning and end, and in the evening have some speakers. And we've got some great speakers we're lining up already. We've got conservation speakers or conservation managers at the beginning. We've got the foundation speaking. Kathy Dean at Save the Rhino is going to talk about the stuff that they do. We've got some experts, local wildlife experts coming in for people that are interested in that. Then throughout the race, we've got, the likes of Damien Hall, some really good athletes to give that athlete's perspective. And then we've also got navigational courses, and even our friends over at the Spine are going to join us. They can do navigational courses and almost like survival courses as well, like what to do if you need to bivvy out and things like that. So it'll be a great event to learn the craft, I suppose. But that being said, this shouldn't be looked at as a training event, even though it can be. It's a gnarly 3 days. It's a tough 3 days. Yeah. And I think it's just like our other races. Knoydart will, if there's any weaknesses, they will be exposed quite quickly by the terrain of Knoydart. I think even I was, because obviously I'd put the lockdown pounds on. Even I was thinking going up those hills, like, yeah, I should have laid off those chocolate fingers. This wasn't to mess around with, like this was a tough area. So
yeah, no, yeah. I'd agree with that. It always kicks the arse at people more than they expect. I know a lot of very hardened Scottish hill goers and mountain climbers and mountaineers, and all of them have this weird. Certainly a number of them have this weird thing where they say, it always just surprises me how long it takes to get out there and how tough it is. And no matter how many times I've done it, I always forget just how much that bit of terrain, kicks my arse. So no, I totally agree. It's not something to be taken lightly. But at the same time, with the infrastructure that you guys have, or we have, or the Beyond the Ultimate has, that makes that entirely manageable for everybody. Yep. So as you say, it's a perfect ground for people to learn about it in an environment where they're not let off the hook in any way, and they have to earn it. But it's a well governed and a safe way to do it, if you like. So I think it's got a lot of really cool avenues to it. One other point that we haven't actually talked about yet is the nature. And we've talked about scenery. We've talked about how beautiful it is. Once we were there, we saw. Plenty of deer, obviously. There's a lot of them. There's too many of them actually, but that's a different discussion. But there are a lot of them, and nobody should come away from that without having seen their fair share of deer. We were sitting having lunch, and a white-tailed sea eagle flew over us and hung about for about 10 minutes. So that was a pretty special moment, being harassed by another bird of prey. I maintain the otters were seen. Our photographer missed it, so apparently it doesn't count. And we saw plenty of seals.
He'd miss it if it were right in front of him, to be fair. Could have come and slapped him in the face. He wouldn't have had his camera out. So
no comment. And
hi, Ed, by the way.
Seals, plenty of them, and dolphins, as you say, on the boat ride in. So there's an abundance of wildlife out there, because it's left alone, because it has such space to roam, as you say, because of that remoteness.
Yeah, and I think what our aim will be is to kind of arm people with information. So if they spot stuff, they can kind of take a 2 and 2 together of what that is, even if you're passionate about wildlife but don't really know what your birds are. I'm pretty weak on like birds and things like that, so it was handy to have you there, just to kind of tell me what sort of eagle that was that we were seeing. But it's one of those things, like, it always amazes me how some of our guys go through the jungle and don't see anything. It's like, oh, it was there, you just didn't see it. And like we had a lady in Kenya that got to like day 3. She's like, oh, I've not seen much wildlife. So you.
No, that's just not possible.
Are you kidding me? Not possible. Kidding me? What are you even looking at? And it's the same with this, isn't it? Like there's going to be 150 people moving through the area, but the thing about this race is that because there's no road network, actually there is infrastructure. We'll have trackers with a UK tracking team watching you, and we'll have things, but extraction is actually quite slow because of that. It's mountain rescue type of extraction. To get to one of our checkpoints, we've got to get a 3-hour boat ride round the peninsula to get there. And that's why we're quietly confident that people are going to still see a lot of wildlife, because the movement of those people is going to be quiet. It's going to be relatively quiet. So you should see stags up on the hillside, and like you said, there's enough of them. We saw even like the Highland cows there look like they've done 10 rounds with Tyson. Like they all look like they've they're hardened to the elements. And I'm trying to think of because even like on day 2 and stuff. So all of this we're talking about is day 1. Day 2, you start to day 2 is even more remote. There's lots of river crossings and all these kind of things. And one of the interesting things that we're going to try out with this race is that water and single plastic use is a bugbear of ours. We're trying to become zero plastic use on all of our races. We're already zero plastic across 3, and we're hoping this would be 4. So rather than carting around loads of plastic bottles, I think it's a pet hate of mine, especially when you see like city half marathons and all the kind of plastic bottles, that we would have some level of compromise where the runners would be able to source their own water, and in their race fee they've got a water filter. Which brand that is, we're down to our last 2 or 3 to select. And we will provide a water map. You won't need to go out and find the water. It will be on the trail that you're running on, but there'll be certain sections where, for example, on day 1, the first 10K, you won't need to worry about sourcing water. We'll have checkpoint with water at the 10K mark. But from that point on, towards checkpoint 2 and on, you can source water locally from streams using the filter. Like, that's a cool element to the race, right? You can't really do that in many places, but you can here because it's relatively untouched and the risk is relatively low. And
we're planning it carefully, and we'll be doing it safely, because some parts here are farmed areas. I mean, when I say farmed areas, it's not like most people will imagine.
Bunch of cows in a massive.
Exactly. You might see 5 cows on the hillside, and they're there. But so no, there's plenty. I mean, fair to say, the one thing I can absolutely guarantee there'll be no shortage of in Scotland in April is water. So
the waterproofs, folks.
But in terms of filling up from streams and things, I mean, frankly, you'll never taste better, if I'm honest with you. Most of the time, I don't use a filter, but I think it's the right thing to do. And we certainly should. But there's an abundance of it, and I love that element too. I think that's a really, again, another really cool part of what we're doing is the planning that's involved in that, and making sure it works, and making sure everyone's got enough and as much as they want. I really do like that. And
what it means is that you've got like that checkpoint. There'll only be 2 checkpoints a day. Typically, there won't be as many as like normally they're every 10K on our races. They'll probably be a bit more stretched out on this one because of the remoteness of it. But that doesn't mean there won't be teams pottering around in places, but the kind of lay of the lands, just to give people an idea, we'll be sharing the maps and the routes out over the next couple of weeks. But you'll start at Camp 1. And you'll do a loop and run around and finish at Camp 2. And then day 2 is a loop where you finish back at the same camp. And then we run back. So there's 2 camps that we basically move between. And each one has its own little bit of uniqueness and character. So like day 1 is a bit of everything. Day 2, we go out and we're doing loads of river crossings, and you're probably going to get across some marshes, and that you won't need to self-nav, but there'll be off-trail bits and bits where you've got to connect trails up, and you'll have to look out for the flags and things. And then day 3, if the weather permits it, we're Munro hunting and going up and seeing what hills and vert we can catch, because the day will be typically shorter. But if the weather's not, then we've got a route which will pretty much return the same kind of way that we went out, and it is not a bad route to do in reverse as well. Like you wouldn't mind doing that stretch of trail again in the other way. So that's the general lay of the land. And so each day you can expect that there'll be a checkpoint where we will, on day 2, I believe we're not too far away from a road at some point, and we can connect up to that, and there'll be water based in our vehicles and stuff like that. But most of the time you can expect that you'll have a little water map, which will be a color coordinated line that says not safe, possibly safe, be cautious, and good to go.
Fill your boots.
Whatever tier structure we decide to go with, and you'll be able to look at that map, look where you are on it, 5, 10K or whatever, and then decide from there, and we can make a real adventure of it. That's the beautiful thing about fast packing. When you do a fair bit of it, is either you can plan to go on routes, and this is where I'll get my water. But one of the things I love to do is just figure it out as you go. Take a capacity and just go, and figure out. And that's what we kind of want to get onto this race, right? It's just that element of, we're here if you need us, but that's it. Like let's enjoy this and make it feel like you're here on your own, or with like-minded people when you need it, right?
100, for sure. And I mean that comes back to the earlier point where you can view this event in so many different ways. You can view it as a really tough running event where you're going to try and compete and do really well, or right the way through to, as you say, it's an introduction to adventuring in Scotland, in an environment where because so many people who run ultras, run multi-day stage races, actually that's almost their only time they're doing that sort of event. A lot of them don't spend the time out in the hills. I've come from it from completely the other side, which is, I've done plenty of races now for the last few years, but for me, for 15 years, it was very much none of that. It was just about being out in the hills, and that was my passion, that was my love. So I like the fact that this meets in the middle and lets people who maybe haven't done as much of that experience it and really build a wild adventure for themselves, knowing that, as you say, if they have any sort of problems, it's not going to lead to anything serious or anything problematic. There's the support structure in place for them, and as you say, the checkpoints will be a bit more spaced out than on some of your races, but there's a very natural reason for the checkpoints to be where they are, where we've planned them. They work very well. Nobody's going to be in long stretches where they're not seeing people, or they're not meeting people, or they're not looked after. There will be the people in place, but at the same time not over the top, because as you say, you want it to feel wild. And as you say, we've talked about day one almost exclusively. Day two is equally, it's probably actually even less well trodden than day one. Weirdly, it's a peninsula that, to be honest, until I was designing this race, even I didn't know that well. I mean, I played on it quite a bit over the years, but there were bits of it that I'd not been to, and I had real joy just after we went up, where we thought, well, actually, maybe that bit doesn't work. We'll just replan this little bit. And I found somewhere new in Scotland to go run, which for me is a real, really great moment in my life. And so even I'm getting adventure out of this, and somebody who spends time running around Scotland as often as I can. So it ticks a lot of boxes, and it has a lot of cool avenues, and nobody's going to feel let down by any of the days. Whether you'll see the tops of the mountains or not, I don't know. That's the nature of Scotland.
Let Mother Nature decide, right?
Let Mother Nature decide, what? Even if you don't, the micro terrain and the macro terrain are equally special. And running along the coastline, you're anywhere. Sometimes you're 20 feet away from the sea. Sometimes you're 2 feet away from the sea, and occasionally you might be in it if you're not too careful. So regardless of what Mother Nature throws at us, it's going to be an adventure for people, and as you say, a great way for them to introduce themselves into that more remote activity and looking after themselves. And that's what people should really, I think about coming into this. Is it's not about planning everything and then having everything put there on a plate for you. It is very much about look after yourself in an environment which needs you to take care, but with a support structure in place behind it. That's kind of my view. But to be fair, that's how I approach all your races.
Yeah, and then there's also the support of other people as well. Yeah. Like our if I look at the 100 that have come on already, there's some noticeable. There's at least 30 or 40 that are our runners. So within that pack of 100, 150 runners, there's 30 or 40 that have done more than one of our races, who will, by their very nature, have the power of the group. They recognize that if you stick together with people and your fellow runners, that you can all get through. And then that's pretty much what we try and promote as much as possible in the races. So I'm pretty sure that will trickle out onto this race as well. And I think the added thing that we've done for this race that we've not done for any of our others is include the team element. So to explain a little bit to everyone about how the team element works, because we've not really put any comms out about that. The team race is either you can enter as a pair or as a 5. Now, the reason why I chose 2 and 5 in particular is because I've done a lot of team events myself, or been drafted in last minute where people have dropped out. It's the very nature of these things that you start with a team of eager 5 people and it ends up with like 2 or 3. The reason why is if your team of 5 are no longer a team of 5, is you can enter as 2 2s. And if you can't do that, you can enter as a 2 and a 1 or whatever.
Yeah.
So, and that's why the price for entry, whether you enter as a team of 5 or a 1, is exactly the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a difference. So the idea is that close to the time, you guys, there's no pressure. If you want to do 2 2s and 5s or whatever, The interesting thing about the clan race, as we're calling it, is that we're really going to promote the idea that, take it like as a really good bit of fun. You don't need to run together. You can run separately. And the rankings of the team races, so the 2s and the 5s, will be a point system. So if you finish first, you get 1 point. If you finish 150th, you get 150 points. And it is the team with the least amount of points at the end of the race that win. Now, what that means is you could be the race leader day one. You could race and you could be 5 hours ahead of the next person in any team race. It doesn't make a difference. They've got one more point than you. So day 2 and 3 become interesting then, because you haven't got that buffer. So every day is a separate race. And I think I love that concept about it, just mainly because it keeps it fresh every day.
Yeah.
And even though we like to promote the idea of looking after each other, I also love that hidden element of competition. So team runners will have a different color number. And if you're running along and you see a blue number rather than a white number, that's a team member and you've got to beat them.
Yeah.
And you'll be pushed on by that. So that's the whole idea of the clan race, and it should be a really cool adventure for a team. So if you're tent mates from other races, if you're part of a running club, if you're part of any other kind of group organization like that want to do a bit of a bonding exercise, or you want to all fall out, could be make or break, doesn't it? Depending on how people decide to run on the 3 days. But it'll be a good bit of fun. Good element, and it's different to our other races. We don't really have that in our other races, so we're going to incorporate in here. And if we'll have different rules. So if you don't finish a stage but you're medically fit, you can come in the next day, but you'll have a point penalty and all these kind of things. So we'll have all the rule structure drafted out properly over the next couple of weeks. But that's the concept of it. But I think that idea of having a clan and forming a clan and trying to take on Scotland together as a group is a cool little idea as well, that should make an interesting element to the race.
Yeah, no, I love it. I mean, it's as I've said, great joy is going out in the hills on my own, but the other one is going out in the hills with pals. And so, as you say, if you can combine the two, create that little bit of competitive element. I won't pretend it's not there in me a little bit, but even though I try to hide it, mainly just because I'm not very good at stuff. Mainly because I'm not very good at competing, so I just pretend I don't care. I think it's a great concept, and as you say, it avoids that situation where it's almost sort of, with 3 days, you could end up in a situation where it's almost sort of one on day one if someone is so far ahead. 5-day races, like your other races, there's always an opportunity, even on days 3, 4, 5, for things to really change out, and that's still true of a 3-day. But you could end up almost.
You haven't got much time to catch time back.
Exactly.
So the attrition isn't going to play about. But the thing with the point system is that if you, let's say for example, your team of 5, one of you has a bad day. Let's say you finished 1st to 4th, your whole team kills a day, but you had 150th come in because they got injured, or they limped their way, they just went for the finish. Then technically you've got a lot of points, but you only need another team to have one of their members do poorly to come in. And have a team of 5 over 3 days, that's 5 different variables that you can do. So all you can do is put your best performance in.
That's it.
And if one of your team members is struggling, you might opt that actually tactically the best thing for us to do is to knock one of our other guys back to stay with that person. To get them across the line.
Exactly. Make up
so it'll be all of these kind of decisions of like, oh God, what are we going to do? And that's the kind of torment that I want to put into the team members.
Well, it can add to the other torments. The way we've designed this is fair but harsh. Let's put it that way. It's there's
typically what would happen is we would look at a hill and go, yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one. I did. That was exactly the conversation we had at one point. I pointed to 2 routes and said, "There's that one, which is relatively easy, or there's that one." And there was no hesitation when you said, "It's that one."
Yeah, it's that one, isn't it? And you've answered it. Now's your time to tell everyone else it's runnable.
I love it.
Well, we should probably not sound so sinister to finish this on.
True. It's a very it's as a, well. I use the word fair. I think that is I think that's that is what this represents this part of the world very well, and it lets you see a lot of it and feel like from the moment you get on the boat. Because that's the other thing we haven't talked about is it starts with the boat. Because we've said that's how you got to get there. So from the moment you step onto that boat to the moment you step back onto it on fourth, fifth day. You are sort of to some extent on your own out there, as a collective. We are all to some extent on our own, and that's another bit of it that I really like. So it's a great way for people to get that separation from the world. You've already said there's not a lot of reception out there. It might pop up every now and then, but there really isn't.
And what I think next year is a year for spending time with people that want to do this kind of stuff and not in the house. 2021 is the year of not being in the house. So anywhere that's not in this room with a crying baby.
I forgot that.
Update, folks. That's since the last time you spoke to us on this episode. There is a baby here.
That's why the bags are there.
This is sleep deprivation to a whole new level, baby. I'm very surprised actually that you've not heard screams from the room above. So we've been quite fortunate actually in this call. I think for those that are listening in, we've got lots more information to come. So if you're on the race, great, can't wait to see you. It's going to be ace. The kit we're going to put out over the next, or the kit list we're going to put out over the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about the partnerships and all the guest speakers. As you can imagine, we're taking things a little slowly at the minute with things that are going on because restrictions might change things in the way that we work, and we're as confident as we are to put on the race, there may be certain elements of restrictions in and all that kind of stuff. So we are going to push that information out. All you need to know though is that this is going to be an epic adventure, whatever way or whatever angle you're coming at this from. Make sure you've got decent waterproofs, make sure you're training now, train over the Christmas period and make sure you're in shape for it so you can have the best time. One of the things that always sticks with me is even in episode 1, way back to this thing, Robbie Britton said that, the training is the hard bit and the event is the bit where you should have the fun.
Yeah.
So, that if we all look at it like that, then, everyone will be in great shape. And then Nick, you're going to do a talk in the evening before where you're going to talk a little bit about the long-term history, which is absolutely fascinating about this area. It's sad. Really sad,
There's some dark parts to it for sure.
There's some things, but then obviously the story of triumph is that I don't think if you know of anywhere, but there's not many places, or if any, in Europe of people that own the land like they do. There's no enterprise like that, is there?
No. Couple more up here, but they're mostly island communities, and it is a very, very unique situation. And
listening to those guys is going to be incredible, in the nights before the race. And if you've got any questions, then obviously you can fire them through to our team at any point. If you're not on the race yet, act fast, because we're going to just share out another couple of videos and things. And I imagine with that final 50 will go out pretty quickly, and we'll be into reserve list territory. So if you're on the fence and you want to ask a couple of questions, you can send a message in at any time. If I was to ask you, Nick, what your favorite part of the race is, it could either be a favorite thing about the race or a favorite part area, what would it be?
It's a good question, because there's a number that have popped into my head. If I had to choose one place, it would be, I think, the stretch between Baronsdale and Kinlochhorn, or coming down from a place called Baronsdale back down to Inveree, which you'll remember from when we were coming back across. Part of that is just some really fun memories I've got of time spent up there where we were, just some epic days in the hills. But for me, I think I love this place, having been out there quite a few times over my life. I love this place almost more just I find it a place I can go and contemplate. I find it a place I can really just go and enjoy immersing myself somewhere, more than many other places. So I just think the experience of being on Knoydart and in that region is almost, the whole thing is kind of taken as a whole rather than a bubble. One.
It's like a little adventure. Like to give some context, we was doing the recce in and around the lockdowns. So I think lockdown 1 had just happened. The numbers it was a September time. So we were out of lockdown, but with local restrictions, and lockdowns were starting, the rumor was starting to creep round again that we were going to go into a second. So we had to take a very small team, very conscious, of the area. We even had to, even in the bunk houses, we had some sleep in the tent and stuff. So we weren't mixing households and things. And, you could with all of those restrictions still on the island, in Inverary, you'd think actually the lockdown would follow us, but actually for those 3 or 4 days, it was insane because you forget about it all.
We forgot.
You forget it. Like the world didn't. The rest of the world, like we didn't see. There was no news and all that kind of thing. And you think, yes, this is. And I think that's my favorite bit as well. Like the scenery that you're talking about is what the guys would have seen on our videos because we've already shared that out. So if you've seen any of our videos, the spots that Nick's talking about are the things that we've shared on there. So you can visualize what he's talking about. But that's the thing. If you just want a place to go, which is just completely off the block for everywhere, then this is the spot. And it's I feel like some people that we speak to, like some of our runners are in Canada and stuff. They get the luxury of being able to go out into the whole bunch of space they've got there and do that. But it doesn't happen in the UK. This doesn't happen in the UK. So that's why this is the last stronghold for that. And
I agree with that.
it's just going to be a wicked place to have a race with everyone. So we'll call it there, I think, Nick.
Yeah,
I think
that's it.
We don't want to give them too much.
Well, exactly. All I'd say is you've probably gathered that I'm perhaps overly, but let's just say enthusiastic about this part of the world. So if anyone's got any questions, nothing I like doing more than chatting about it. So get in touch through the team, and I'm happy to either speak or email or message or whatever. It's a real passion for me, so I'm delighted to help where I can. If anyone's thinking.
So what we're going to plan to do in the new year is have a Q&A at least once or twice a month for anyone that signed up to any of our races. So that will be access to some of our team where you can talk kit, travel, whatever you want to do. We have the Highland Ultra Facebook group, which we will share out on the comms. I think we're planning to share some comms out on Monday next week. So if you're one of the subscribers and listening to this on Friday or over the weekend, the Monday is when we're going to send out some comms where we link up the Facebook group. But it's there if you want to come and hang out with us in the Facebook group. It will start posting more information out on there. So just put BTU Highland Ultra Runners group into Facebook. It's a private group, so we'll have to let you in once we recognize the name. If you've got any questions at all, you can fire them into me. There's Nick now as well, and we are really looking forward to seeing you guys in Neustadt